Welcome to the Procuretech Podcast, where we aim to excite and inspire you about how technology will shape our profession's future. I'm your host, James Meads, and I worked in corporate procurement for 16 years before starting my own business as a content creator and consultant in the procurement technology space. I'm deeply convinced that procurement must become less technocratic and embrace the entrepreneurial spirit and creativity if we're ever going to shake off our image of being a process-obsessed, box-ticking function. You definitely won't find vanilla content on here, and we're not afraid to tackle some controversial topics and tell it like it really is. So if that's your thing, now let's jump right into this week's episode. Yes, greetings and a very warm welcome to another edition of the Procuretech Podcast. We are the official podcast of procurementsoftware.site, where you can search, filter, drill down on any procurement software solution that you wish to. So if you're out there in the market for some procurement technology, but you're a little bit confused about the breadth of opportunities that are out there on the market, our website will allow you to really make sense of all of the noise that is out there. With over 400 solutions that we've got listed, you will find and be able to sort on any single solution that you want to and research the opportunities. But we're not here to talk about that. We're instead here to talk about a new feature which has just been launched with one of the well-established providers out there in the payment space that is now really branching out into procurement technology with guided buying. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to my guest today, who is Thejo Kote, founder and CEO of Airbase. Thejo, very warm welcome.
James, thank you so much for having me.
And your company name is very similar, actually, to a tool that I'm all over in my business called Airtable. So I hope I'm not going to mix the two up during the interview and do a slip of the tongue. So before we begin, could you perhaps just give a really brief intro to your background and how you ended up in the procurement tech or procure-to-pay space?
Sure. So again, thank you for having me. And I've been working on Airbase since, say, sometime in 2017. That's when I started digging into it, doing my research. Before starting Airbase, I was a co-founder of another startup that we built over a period of 6 years and ultimately sold to SiriusXM. And it was during that journey that I learned about the problem of spending in companies and spend management and procurement and these areas. And I'm an engineer and product person by training. And when I started my previous company, I didn't know the first thing about finance or procurement or any of these functions, but I was forced to learn, right? And partly because we made hardware as a business, we had to kind of build inventory, and doing that right was very important. Otherwise, it could have killed the business. And so I made the effort over a period of years, asked lots of dumb questions, and I also realized that the whole process of how procurement happens and spend management happens in businesses was quite broken. And but I didn't have the time to do anything about it. We were building a very different business. My prior business was a connected car platform, but it went into my ideas notebook, right? And then finally, when I had the chance, when we sold that business, and after I'd taken a break, I spent a lot of time talking to folks in the ecosystem, testing my thesis about what was broken and how it could be made better. But that's how I got started, with Airbase. And for the first few years, we have definitely focused on spend management as a product. We've always focused on the mid-market specifically. We don't focus on very small businesses. We don't focus on really large enterprises. A key part of our thesis has always been that middle segment, right? Say from 100 employees to say 5,000 employees is very underserved when it comes to procurement and spend management solutions. And our North Star goal at the end of the day is to bring together all of the workflows and payments that happen related to non-payroll spending, in any business into one platform, right? And so that's easy to say, but a tall order in terms of actually delivering on it. And the new guided procurement, or the procurement aspect of the solution we have launched earlier this year is in my view, a step in a series of steps that we've been working towards over the last few years.
Yeah, and you touched on a great point there. And I completely agree with you that SMEs and the mid-market specifically have historically been underserved when it comes to spend management or procurement tech software in general. Your core customer base historically, when we were preparing this, you said has been sort of more tech startups and rapid growth companies. If you're going to mix that and merge that together with mid-market businesses from, let's say, more traditional industry sectors, what challenges do you feel that these two sectors have in common when it comes to procurement that you can sort of help to unite through the software that you've built?
Yeah, so the good thing about the problem we solve in the domain we solve it in is that every business spends money, right? And you can't have a meaningfully sized business without facing the problem of your procurement process and the technology you use to solve that and automate lots of manual tedious work that otherwise procurement or accounting teams would have to do. And so there are lots of similarities from that perspective. And to focus specifically on the guided procurement product that we offer, we think of that in terms of starting with the employee experience that we want to deliver, right? And so a key thing that breaks down in companies as they grow into hundreds of employees is, if somebody wants to buy something, it's a gauntlet. The process that they have to go through becomes really, really complex and involving many different teams, right? So it is the department heads who have to weigh in on the budget implications of buying something. It could be your direct manager, department head. Then you have to go through IT security reviews. There may be legal reviews. There may be finance and accounting people involved to sign off on specific aspects of that purchase and request. So it becomes a collaboration problem, if you will, right? So it doesn't matter what the size of the business is or what vertical you're in and how you're operating. It essentially is in many ways a collaboration problem and information exchange and workflow problem. And so that's a key element that we seek to solve. And yes, downstream from that, there are the payments problems. There are the still further problems around the AP automation piece of it. And these tend to be kind of common problems across the whole chain. And Airbase focuses on bringing the solution end to end, all the way from the moment an employee thinks, hey, I want to spend money, how do you get them going? How do you solve that collaboration problem really well that serves the needs of all of these stakeholders in the business at the same time and get adoption for a good procurement process that works, right? That gives you visibility into how much spend is happening within control, with visibility, with pre-approval, while not destroying that experience that you deliver to customers, all the way through to how do I receive those invoices? How do I match the POs? How do I pay the vendor? How do I make sure it's all recorded correctly in my general ledger? So these are all fairly common steps of that problem, no matter what the vertical is. But at Airbase, we tend to focus a little bit more on what I think of as knowledge economy companies. Right? Yes, we started off with tech companies, fast-growing companies, and a good size of our customer base is made up of companies like that, really good kind of companies and logos. But increasingly over the last few years, we have also broadened that into what I think of as knowledge economy companies, where you could simplify it into saying, hey, if the majority of employees are sitting behind a computer doing work, then that's probably a knowledge economy company. And so that's kind of how our focus is broadened over time. And they for sure have all of these challenges that I was talking about in terms of the process related to how they spend money.
Especially as they mature, right? Because as you said, I mean, when a startup is a startup, it's pretty easy to manage spend through just giving each employee a purchasing card or a company card, which is what you grew out of being, right? And as you alluded to, that when we talk about P2P or procure to pay, the pay side, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you obviously know a lot more about this space, but the pay side for growing companies has been pretty well served over the years and has matured with things like accounts payable automation and expense reconciliation, that type of thing. But the intake side and guiding someone that needs to buy something through the process, and as you said, as a company grows and matures and maybe acquires something like a legal department or an internal audit department, or has various different budget holders that the spend has to be approved through, that's when these companies start to become complex, and maverick spend can tend to overrun them if they don't bring their processes along with them as they grow, right? As you correctly said, as a startup becomes a fully fledged mid-market business. And, I think it's common knowledge, or it's becoming common knowledge out there, that some of the legacy brands out there that made traditional business spend management or procurement technology don't really offer a nimble, user-friendly solution to the mid-market. And as we've seen, especially for anyone that's listening to this that comes from the procurement space, one of the big players in that space, Cooper, recently laid off a lot of people. And I think that was I think, tantamount to the problem that you can't package relatively bloated product that's been designed for large corporate organizations into something that smaller companies will buy. Why is that? Well, because ROI, UI, UX, ease of implementation, all of these things are paramount. And potential customers, though, they're perhaps not aware of other solutions that are out there because, let's be honest and take off our hats to companies like Cooper and SAP Ariba. They've done a pretty good job with marketing. So how do you then, as someone coming into or branching out your offer that you have in your product, how do you tackle that? How do you differentiate yourself in what is already quite a busy marketplace?
Yeah. So first of all, I have a lot of respect for Copa and SAP and companies like that. They've built amazing businesses, right? And something as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I look up to them. I aspire to someday get to the revenue scale and all that kind of stuff. But, the matter is one more of fit, right? And historically, if you look at the markets that the Copas, the Aribas and solutions like that have served, they are large enterprises, and they are a good solution for the kind of complex needs that those large enterprises have. And the problem has been that as companies outgrow small business tools that they initially start with in the very early days, when they are 5 employees, 10 employees, 15, 20 employees, at some point they grow and they become more mature businesses with more complex operational needs. But then, at least until a few years ago, until Airbase came around, and I think there are a few other tools that are trying to kind of target a similar market right now, there wasn't really an option of where do I go to next, right? And I'm a 200, 300, 400 employee company now. The only option you had was, okay, I think if I don't want to use these small business tools that really aren't meeting our needs right now, I have like 3, 4, 5 different tools. I have one for the intake workflow was not even a dedicated tool. It was Slack. It was email. It was, an Excel spreadsheet, a Google form, and all those kinds of things. And then you had, a separate AP automation tool, a corporate card, an expense management tool. So you ended up with 4, 5, 6 different tools to solve this whole problem of workflows and payments. And the only way you could solve that well was to say, fine, okay, I need to go to a procure to pay solution, which ended up being a Coupa or something really heavy and too expensive and takes too long to implement. And the UI, UX was not really, at a level that employees would really happily use or could navigate around and things like that, right? And so these were the challenges, and that's kind of what Airbase is trying to solve in that middle segment. And I think of it similarly as if you look at how the ERP systems, general ledgers evolved over time, that there's a reason why you have QuickBooks and Xero at the low end of the market. You have the NetSuite, Intacct and solutions like that in the middle, and then you have SAP, Oracle, in the enterprise segment. That over the last 20 years, I think has segmented itself nice. Well, maybe even longer than 20 years. But I think the procurement technologies and spend management, that's why I feel the middle segment is so underserved. There aren't like good solutions, especially when you think of them as suites where you can bring together all of these elements and consolidate them into a single platform that serves their maturity needs, but at the same time can bring a consumer grade UX. Like that's a key thing from a differentiation perspective that you were asking about. How do you, provide a consumer grade UX and not, 15, 20, 25-year-old legacy, enterprise software and ask employees to use that, because employees are used to amazing experiences that they're using all day long, right, on the web and on their mobile apps and stuff like that. And how do you bring that kind of an experience to the procurement workflow, modern user experience, really good design, attention to detail, And that's kind of what we do, right? That's what we've always done. And this new procurement module that we have launched, that's partly because as we have gone up market, we've learned about serving the procurement persona who enters a business as a company is maturing, right? Because if you look at companies in that 100 to 500 employee segment, they almost never have a full-time procurement person that's managed by the controller or other people in the office of the CFO. But at some point of maturity of a business, a procurement person comes in, and as Airbase has gone through that journey of maturity, we have learned more and more about the needs of a procurement person and a persona, and that's how our Untitled Procurement kind of product came into being. But in terms of differentiation, I think Airbase is also the only product, I would say, in the middle segment that targets that segment today, that actually is able to deliver on this promise of showing a path towards consolidation of all non-payroll spending, right? Our center of gravity is definitely in the procure to pay area, right? Where it's the front end of those intake workflows, the procurement workflows, the configurability, the usability, and the ability to solve that collaboration problem while meeting the needs of the procurement folks. That's that aspect of it. Then there's the AP automation aspect of it. You create the POs, you have a really good process for that, and then you do all of the AP automation stuff downstream, take care of the payments. But in addition to that, if you really want to think of, hey, how do I consolidate expense management into that platform? How do I consolidate corporate card spend management? And how do I do that globally, right? How do I handle all of the international subsidiaries that I have and solve this problem in one platform globally? Okay, that's the hard problem to solve. And I don't think there's anybody else in the market which can even come close to showing that path to consolidation and doing that credibly. It's one thing to say you can be a mile wide and an inch deep in terms of the solutions that you provide. But when you say, I can actually help you consolidate all of these non-payroll spending across the intake workflows, across AP automation and expense management and corporate card spend management, you got to also be able to deliver on the complexity that these larger businesses need ultimately, right? And because they are their own personas, they have their own needs, they have to do the work day in and day out. You can't go to them and say, hey, I do AP automation. And you don't have to, for example, use a Bill.com on the lower end, a Tipalti or a Coupa on the higher end. But by the way, if you adopt our solution, you got to give up all of this functionality that you need to do your job day to day. We're going to get laughed out of the room. So how do you bring not just the breadth, but also the depth and show a path to consolidation over time, which is also something I think really resonates with people. Nobody wants to use 4, 5, 6 different tools. Nobody wants employees to have to go into 2, 3, 4 different tools to spend money. How do you make the case? Hey, just go in here, one interface, right? For all spending that you have to deal with as an employee, no matter what it is in the business. That's appealing. That is a very compelling value proposition. And that's where I think Airbase shines, right?
There are a couple of things that you mentioned in your answer that I'd like to drill down a little bit on actually, Thejo, because you hit on a couple of really important notes there. Because number one, as you alluded to, is understanding your industry sector and your market. And I do think some of these new procurement tech platforms have built a product and then suddenly they're trying to be everything to everybody and building modules left, right, and center without necessarily going deep enough with their core products. And that can often be a distraction. And I think the second one that you mentioned is being able to design a product around who's actually going to use it. And as you rightly said, the type of procurement person that's coming into these types of businesses that are your target customer, typically they're not going to be the 20-year corporate lifer that's worked in procurement at a Fortune 500 company and has got different ideas of what procurement software should do and is used to dealing with a very bureaucratic corporate environment that they've become entangled in over the years. So I think guided procurement can mean different things to different people. So how have you owned that term with the module that you've built within Airbase?
So ultimately for us, it comes down to a few elements, right? So one, which is extremely important, as I was talking about earlier, is the consumer grade UX. It is when you expose employees to this experience, is it actually something they can navigate without a lot of training, without a lot of hand-holding, can it be self-serve for the most part, where you point them to a particular entry point, and then the product guides them through that whole process of what they need to do, gives them all of the clarity of what information do I need to provide to make this decision, who has to approve it, where is it in that stage of approval. All of those kinds of things become very, very clear and easy to understand, and guides people to the right outcome that they look, right? And so that's kind of one key important element to it. And so because you have to consider all of the different personas involved in the process of buying and serve all of the needs, right? And so from an employee's perspective, the key thing is convenience, right? You want to get in, you want to get out, you want to understand, because nobody wakes up in the morning being excited about going through a procurement process. Let's be honest about that, right? So you want to make that as easy and simple as possible from their perspective and help them get back to their job, right? So that's one from an employee's perspective. But at the same time, the other persona is the approver of that spend, right? So, and they take slightly different forms. And like I was talking about earlier, you could have the department head, you could have the FP&A team thinking about the budget and how this fits into the budget. You can have, the IT security people bring a slightly different lens into that problem, when you're trying to bring on a new vendor. It could be the legal team thinking about the contracting process. They bring a different lens. And the accounting team is really thinking about how should I, handle this from an accounting perspective? Should I be advertising this? And am I collecting the right information up front, which gives me everything I need to do my job when I close the books at the end of the month? So they're all bringing their own perspective. So this tool has to solve that collaborative nature and balance the needs of all of these different stakeholders, flexibility to collect the information all of these stakeholders need to do their job. And at the same time, the integrations where in many cases you don't even want those other teams to come and operate in Airbase, right? So Airbase has a number of these integrations with external systems like Jira, Asana, Ironclad, so on and so forth, and open APIs. If people want to even build many more integrations, how do you get information to flow in and out from this front-end intake process into all of these downstream systems that any mature business will ultimately have? Your legal team will live in a contract lifecycle management system. Your IT security team may prefer a Jira-based process. And how do you push and pull information out of the systems that they prefer to kind of live in? And so that's the other important element of meeting the stakeholders who may not even want to be in Airbase in the first place and want to operate out of their own processes that they've defined in other tools. So that's another important aspect of what we bring to the table. So fundamentally, that's how we look at it. We start with the people involved in that process, in the procurement process as a whole, and then you work backwards. Obviously, in all of this, the procurement professional, if there is one in the business, is a key kind of stakeholder. They have certain metrics and numbers that they are tracking, right? So they're asking themselves, what savings am I driving? And what are the cycle times and who is blocking it? How do I, and they're held accountable by the CFO for, some of these things. What percentage of overall spend am I getting under, this process as a whole? And what percentage of spend is PO backed? And do you have the right reporting for them to help answer those questions after you're doing all of this? So this is fundamentally, you start with all the different personas who are involved in that process. And then you work backwards to ask the question, what's an amazing experience for each of them? And that's the lens we bring, and that's the perspective we bring to our version of Garip.
And there's no right or wrong answer necessarily to this, is there? But what do you see as a happy balance between features and functionality versus the ability to remain nimble and to stay narrow but go deep into the procure to pay process? Because on the one hand, I think everyone acknowledges that a mid-sized business is not going to run 12 different tools to manage their procurement and legal and supply chain process. But then on the other hand, as you quite rightly said, if there is already an established legal team or logistics team that may be using another platform for certain aspects of their roles that sort of touch into the buying or the procurement process, there's always going to be the need for flexibility to, as you said, to maybe plug into a more detailed contract management solution, because Airbase doesn't offer that, or a sourcing module that you've deliberately not built a module for, but you recognize that some companies will want that.
Yeah. And look, ultimately, procurement people, I think in some ways have the difficult job or the thankless job of herding cats and making multiple stakeholders in the business happy at the end of the day, right? And that's not...
We try to. We don't always succeed.
Exactly. And that's not always the easiest job to do, right? And guided procurement exists to partly make that difficult process easier for procurement professionals and give them one tool that can meet the needs of all of these stakeholders who bring their own lens to the problem, right? So I was talking about the employees and IT security, legal, all those different teams. So that's one key aspect of how we think about the value that guided procurement can bring to the table. And but you're right, there is no one size fits all. That's kind of the challenge of the problem as a whole, because different companies have very different combinations, and our guided procurement tool has to be able to map to their work process or how they think something should work, right? And we see all kinds of combinations, right? And all the way from preferences of third-party tools to, in some cases, they don't have that maturity. They want to do everything within Airbase, and that's okay. You have to have the power to actually deliver on that at the end of the day. And when it comes to kind of features, that's also the whole spectrum, right? And the thing with workflow-driven SaaS software is it's always a fight between kind of the complexity that the market and customers are demanding, because everybody wants a slightly different thing, a slightly different workflow, a few more knobs to control, how the actual workflows happen and the configurability and things like that. But then on the other hand, what you're fighting is the complexity that you don't want to expose that to end employees, right? And so how do you kind of find that balance? How do you not end up becoming this monstrosity with 1,000 knobs that is extremely hard to use, which unfortunately any mature enterprise software, it looks like ends up going there ultimately, right? But how do you avoid that fate? And at the same time, how do you bring a really good experience to primarily the employees? The professionals can deal with complexity, right? So that's how we think about it, is when you kind of, can we provide the depth and the complexity to the professionals and the practitioners whose job it is to deal with that complexity day to day, while surfacing a very different kind of a simple experience to end employees? How do you find that balance, right? And how do you do that in an environment where pretty much every company has a slightly different need of how they want to bring together the overall experience in the process that they define? Because it's also a very human problem, right? There are personalities, there are preferences, there are all of these kinds of things that have to be accounted for in ultimately the process that you codify in the tool, and it has to be flexible enough to support that.
So if I paraphrase you a little bit, then it's with the market segment that you're in, it's almost like you want to offer a relatively standard product that you don't want to have to customize on the back end, because your pricing model doesn't really allow you to do that. But at the same time, you want it to be agile enough on the front end for the customer to be able to customize it enough to be able to meet the individual needs of different countries, geographies, industry sectors, that type of thing.
Correct. And that's an investment we've made in the back-end administration tools, because we don't want our customers to be in a year-long implementation cycle, right? And we don't want them to spend large amounts of money, or the first year subscription fee that we might charge just on the implementation fee. So that's not the model we follow. We do implementation ourselves, and a lot of it is out of the box. When you get going, we come in with an opinion on what we think is a good starting point, and that just works for a lot of customers. Others want to tweak it, tune it on top of it. And we have consultants and onboarding team members who work with customers to help that. And we hold ourselves to, in a lot of cases, customers are up and running and live within 30 days, right? And even for our larger customers with 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees, you can get there. If you're motivated, you can absolutely, set everything up and get going in as little as 30 days, but almost always within 60 days. And so those are kind of some of the goals we hold ourselves to. And when we build the onboarding experience, when we build the self-serve tools, that's what we're kind of keeping in mind, because we don't want to be that tool where it takes forever to implement and get to value and actually roll it out. And so that's a key area of focus for us.
Do you often find going into those types of businesses that you're often having to educate the project sponsor, because you said that often it's a very small or even a lone ranger as a procurement manager within those organizations. So you wouldn't have that in an enterprise company, would you typically? But do you find that you're often having to hold their hand a lot more?
That absolutely happens more when you don't even have a procurement person and it's the controller or somebody from a different profession who is tasked with improving the process, right? And so in that case, we're consultants, right? So we go in with an opinion, we have playbooks, we have best practices, and we work with our customers to say, because a lot of them just outright ask us, right? Hey, this is not what I do for a living. So you tell me what good looks like, right? So what are your recommendations for us? And we hear that quite a bit. And so we have those opinions and playbooks that we take to customers. Of course, when procurement professionals get involved, in the process, they have more of an opinion for sure, but we also run across people with different levels of experience. And sometimes, people are shifting careers and getting into procurement for the first time, or a company has taken somebody already on the team who was doing accounting, who was doing some other profession, and said, hey, why don't you take on this challenge as part of a growth kind of journey for you? Go solve the procurement problem. Like, we're going to make procurement, you're the procurement manager of the company now. And so they're getting going and learning about that. And so, in all of these cases, the way we think about it internally at Airbase is we have to have an opinion. Obviously, opinion, but a flexible mind at the same time. And so we have the advantage of seeing lots of different customers implement, these processes. And we have the advantage of seeing what has worked, what has not worked, what works well, what doesn't work well. So we're not shy to share our thoughts and opinions about what those best practices are. But ultimately, it is the customer's call. And so that's how we approach it.
Yeah, interesting. And you're based in San Francisco, which is obviously the heart of the tech industry, and the US is it's a pretty big market. But what are your future plans, both in terms of tech roadmap and in terms of perhaps expanding your geographical scope? Is there a market or industry sector or geography that you feel is pretty well suited to what Airbase offers that you haven't tackled yet from a product or a sales and marketing perspective?
So right now, our focus primarily is on US headquartered companies. But as I was mentioning earlier, a lot of the companies that we serve, they have many international subsidiaries, right? So they have employees and either sales officers or R&D officers or a mix of the two all over the world. And so we definitely, the product and the platform supports those international use cases, multi-currency and all that kind of stuff. Money movement in a lot of different countries. Our capabilities are growing, by the week, by the month, in those areas. And so we definitely think of ourselves in terms of the solution we provide as being global, right? But in terms of our go-to-market efforts, who do we focus on? So that's more focused on US headquartered companies. As an example, we don't go after a company in Asia that only operates in Asia. And so we don't try to go and sell to them right now. And we're in that kind of stage of growth and maturity. And the good news is that the US is a massive market, even for US headquartered companies. We believe we can go build a public company, eventually, just if we focus on the US market. And if we do a really good job solving their global problems. And that's a good enough opportunity. And I don't see ourselves going, selling globally directly in some of these other markets, at least for the next, say, 18 to 24 months. But time will tell. At some point, if we continue to grow at the trajectory we grow and we are growing and we have the ambitions of continue to maintain a certain growth rate, we got to expand that total addressable market, go into other geographies and things like that. And we'll see how those things play out. But for now, we're focused on US headquartered companies.
Okay, that's great to know. I was asking you that just in case anyone has liked what they've heard on this and wants to reach out. So if anyone does and would like to connect with you, where is the best place that we should send them?
So, airbase.com, our website is a great place to start if you want to learn more about us. And that's spelled as the word Airbase is. And just you can navigate to airbase.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, right? So just search for my name and please connect with me and reach out to me. And I'm always happy to connect with procurement professionals, finance, accounting professionals. I learn a lot. Like I said, I'm not a practitioner, or at least wasn't until I do this, but I started doing this a few years ago. But, now I've spent thousands of hours with, finance, accounting, and procurement professionals. And it's fun to really dig deep into the problems and learn about those problems and ultimately translate that into solutions. And so I'm always open for that. So please don't hesitate to connect and reach out.
And there's a lot of procurement tech companies in your region as well that I'm sure you've networked with as well on your way. So yeah, we will link to all of that in the show notes, Thejo. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better, and wishing you all the success for the future.
James, thank you so much for having me.
So that was Airbase, and that was Thejo talking all about guided buying and how Procure to Pay can grow and mature in rapidly scaling knowledge companies as they grow and prosper and require a more robust solution for their spend management. Thank you very much for listening to this show. We know there are a lot of procurement podcasts out there, so we're extremely grateful that you've chosen to listen to this particular one today. And don't forget, if you like what you hear, then please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, because it does help us to reach more people. Until next week, take care wherever you are in the world. We will see you again, same time. Until then, bye for now.